Good evening and welcome to another edition of Words2Action. My name is Ken Gordon and I'm so glad and so happy to be back in the chair again. Last week, for those of you who followed us, you'll remember that I had a wonderful guest host in the person of Dr. Tamiko Smith, who did an awesome job of guiding the Words2Action ship through the waters for that week. And I just want to give my shouts out to Dr. Smith and thank her so much for taking over and sitting in the pilot seat while I was out in Denver, Colorado doing my thing. So Dr. Smith, thank you so much. This week we're going to talk about the importance of diversity in the media. Now, if you recall, there was a time that we talked a little bit about the responsibility of media to the African American community. And between the two of us, and please don't tell anyone, but it kind of upset a couple of people when we talked about that. So obviously we were on the right road. So we're going to talk about it again. All right, so anyway, welcome to Words to Action. My name is Ken Gordon, your host, and I'm so excited to be here with you this evening. And let me take you to the quote of the day with Words to Action for the day. And that quote is, "There are nowhere near enough black faces, black voices, and black articles. There's still a perspective out there that is not covered." And that's a quote by Faith Morris, who is the CEO and chief strategist of Merge Consumer Marketing, as she talked about the importance of diversity in the media. So one of the most important things when you talk about diversity is you talk about perspectives. You talk about the importance of sharing someone's perspective with other people so that they have an appreciation for that. Now, since we're on the topic of media, I think it's only fitting that before I go any further in my show, that I honor, if you will, one of the most prolific and one of the greatest icons in African American broadcast history, and that is none other than Hal Jackson. Hal Jackson passed away this past week. Hal was born in Charleston, South Carolina. He grew up in Washington, D.C. He was the first African American radio sports announcer. He was the first African American who owned and operated a radio station. He was also inducted into the National Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and also inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. He passed away on May 23rd, and he passed away at the age of 96. And he blazed so many trails, and he made the way for so many of us to have an opportunity to sit here. I stand on the shoulders of Hal Jackson. And Hal, I know that you're resting with the big man in the sky. Thank you for everything that you did to make this possible for Words to Action. Thank you so much. One of the things that really struck me is I was driving along one day and was listening to NPR. And a lady came on NPR and she was talking about a series on HBO called Girls. And when she was talking about it, it was really interesting because what she talked about was the criticism that has come from many about the show. And what the criticism really has been is that if you take a look at the cast of Girls, they are all Caucasian. Now, I don't know if they are a different ethnicity. I don't know if they're Jewish or Protestant. I don't know that. But what I know is that if you take a look at the picture for Girls, you will see that they are all white, bottom line. And so there's been a lot of criticism about the show that there's not any diversity, that there's not another perspective that is being told. And it's basically saying to the creator of it, which is you see on the picture here, where is the black perspective? Where is the diversity? I listened very carefully when she addressed that question, and she addressed it in I think a very interesting way that I'm going to use to kind of launch us into our discussion for today. Basically, what she said was that it never occurred to her to have anyone of any other ethnicities or any other kind of diversity on her show, because she was just really looking to make the show represent who she was and how she grew up. But she then went on later on in the show to talk about the fact that she has a lot of tattoos. And the tattoos are all of cartoons, and they are all of figures from the television. And so the person said to her, well, why do you have these particular tattoos? And her answer was really interesting. Her answer was that when she grew up watching television, it was these characters on the TV that inspired her. She saw herself in these characters. One of the tattoos is of Eloise. And she said, in Eloise, who was a very precocious young lady, and in Eloise, she saw herself. and it inspired her to become who she is today. Now, here's a young lady who's 24 years old, and she has an HPL special. But then on the other side, she says, but you know what? I just wanted to tell the story how I saw it, and I didn't really even think about anybody else's perspective. My question to her is, if seeing people that you could identify with on television inspired you to do what you're doing, then why isn't it important that you, now that you're in that position, that you enable other people to have that same inspiration? We're going to talk about that a little bit today with our first guest. Our first guest for the day is Kellie C. Murphy. Kellie is a modern alternative to the daily newspaper and to the to the roving reporter, all right, to the average roving reporter. She's smart, she's stylish, and she is sassy. Welcome to Words to Action.
Hello, sir.
Kellie.
How are you?
It is so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Again. So listen, I had you here once before, and we talked a little bit about the importance of, the responsibility of media to the African American community, and as you recall, it made some people kind of angry.
Yes.
So we were doing our job.
People take it personally.
We were doing our job. And let me just say really quickly that Kellie is a journalist. Obviously, she has a website, and that website is www.kcmjournalist.com. And I encourage all of you to follow Kellie on her website, because she has some very insightful and very interesting articles that she does, and her perspective is very different. One of the issues that we had before, for those of you who recall, is we had Kellie here once before, and we talked a little bit, like I said, about the importance of diversity in the media, etc. But I wanted to bring Kellie back today to talk a little bit more in depth and to really explore, because she hit on something in the last time that she was here, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. So let me just kind of take a step back, and journalism is what you do. It's what
Yes.
pays the bills for you.
Yes.
And you're not necessarily, there's not necessarily a lot of you out there.
No.
Not necessarily a lot of African American journalists.
No.
And maybe I should say people of color. I don't want to make an assumption that you're African American.
But you can, because I am.
Because everyone seems to think that dark skin means you're African American.
Yeah.
That's not true. But anyway, so let's talk for a second. One of the things in preparing for this show that I noticed is that there are a lot of diversity conferences all over the country.
Yes.
Every single year. Why? Why is there so much diversity in the media conferences? Why is that such a big topic?
I think conferences are to placate people.
Okay.
Most of the time.
Okay.
You know, if you get accused of not being diverse enough, oh, let's have a conference. It doesn't mean that anything changes.
Mm-hmm.
It just means you get together and talk. You may learn some things, but nothing really changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about business. Journalism is a business.
Okay.
And businesses are in business to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And if diversity training meant that they could make more money, then you'd see more diversity.
But why is there, who are they placating, or why is there even a call for this? I mean, it's every single year. Why? I mean, certainly, since when did the world ever start caring about what people of color think? So why are they actually doing conferences on diversity in the media?
When people of color holler, people pay attention nowadays. It
Okay.
does matter. And
Okay.
you don't want to have the reputation of being a news publication or a news television show or a news network that doesn't cater to, to every demographic in every walk of life. So you don't want to appear as if you're insensitive to those things. But there's no real true diversity.
And that's my point.
Right.
They can appear all they want, but
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is, are they substituting conferences for real progress here?
Yes. What I compare it to the difference between having sex and making love.
Okay.
They look the same on the outside.
They're not
They're
the
not.
same? I'm just asking.
But you don't know, Kevin? They're not the same.
I'm just, hey,
Yeah.
look.
The physical act may be the same, but the feelings are different. There's a real long-term understanding between two people that really love each other.
Hang on for me 1 second. Note to my guest relations coordinator, let's do a show about the difference between having sex and making love.
Can I come back
Anyway,
to that one?
yes, you can. Obviously, I'm doing something wrong. Okay, so we're talking about making love.
Yeah, the point is that if you really want true
Now, this
diversity,
has nothing to do with African Americans getting screwed.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
So that's a different kind of lovemaking.
That's a different kind of lovemaking altogether. But if you want true diversity in the newsroom or on a television show or a news show, you really have to get inside those issues. And that means that you have to have the people in the newsroom or in the editorial room where
All
you're
right.
having those meetings to discuss this.
So let's talk about that. Then what does diversity in the media really look like? Not to the average person picking up the newspaper or looking at the television. What does it really look like from the profession standpoint?
Well, it doesn't look like what most editors and publishers will point you toward when you ask them about diversity. They'll always tell you, you know, just like that person that you call a racist and they say, I'm not a racist, I have a black friend. It's the same thing. They'll say, I have a black, you know, editor. I have an Asian editor. I have, you know, reporters, beat reporters that are African American. That's not the point.
Okay.
The point is that are you coming together? Are all those people together at the editorial meeting really discussing these issues? You know, and I'm not just talking about what to cover. You know, I'm talking about how far-reaching a newspaper is, how far-reaching a new show is. You know, the kinds of things that make money aren't necessarily the kinds of things that bring people together.
So let's take a step back then. But so is it important to have African American? And I want to deal with the African American experience for right now. And you can substitute any other people of color into this discussion. You can, you know, Latinos or Asian Americans, whatever. So we'll use kind of African Americans as kind of the broad-based terminology. But why is it important to have African American cameramen? Who cares?
It matters because you have a certain perspective. You know, a hot button issue right now in the media is marriage equality, right? So if you don't have anybody in your newsroom that can really cover that sensitively and cover it from a personal, you know, when you have a personal stake in it, that means you're going to cover it differently. You're going to be sensitive to those issues. Well, it's the same thing with African Americans, right? If you don't have somebody, you know, covering that issue, or the guy standing behind the camera, you know, or the guy in the editing room, or the woman who's, you know, copy editing. You don't have all those people in your newsroom, then you're not getting the full perspective.
Now, Kelly, you have been accused of making statements and not having facts. I'm not going to say who said it, but...
You want an example? You want an example?
No. What I want you to tell me then is you live this.
Yes.
So when you go around, and you've written for some of the top newspapers in the area, and you've interfaced with a lot of media, when you go around, what do you see?
I see a lot of fighting. You got to fight for everything.
Okay.
You have to, if you want any kind of positive, you know, stories in the paper, because the negative stuff is sexy. It sells papers. You know, if you want positive images of African Americans, if you want that black cameraman, you know, you want that black female copywriter, you know, you have to fight. There's always fighting. That's
but
why
in all fairness, and you said it at the beginning of the show, in all fairness, don't we have a responsibility though to encourage our community to want to be cameramen and want to be writers?
Yes, and I have a lot of young people who come to me. A young woman on Facebook 3 weeks ago, came to me and asked me why there was no national coverage of this Urban Prep Academy. Have you heard of this school in Chicago? All black school, all black males.
Okay.
And they all graduated, senior class all graduated, and they're all going on to college. This is unprecedented.
Okay.
All going on to college. This was not covered.
All going on to college on sports scholarships.
No.
They play basketball.
No. These are bright kids.
Oh, they play football.
No, dog. They're going to college because of academics.
No, that can't be.
Exactly.
No.
But see, that's not being reported.
Okay.
And I said to her, I said, well, isn't Trayvon a whole lot sexier than Urban Prep Academy? And she said, you know what? I never thought of it that way. I said, Trayvon's going to sell a whole lot more papers.
Sure.
Because people believe that. People believe that young black kids are being shot and killed.
But we live in a capitalistic society.
Yes.
So, I mean,
it sells papers.
Okay. All right. So let me kind of shift gears for a moment. When we think about diversity in the media, how does diversity in the media affect the everyday person?
You may
you're a journalist.
You at all.
You're a journalist. So how does having more of you in the newsroom, because every newsroom is not like the Trentonian, which is very diverse and an excellent newspaper. But how does it look though when you don't have a lot of yous out there? How does the everyday person deal with that?
They deal with it by not buying the paper. If you're an African American and you're not seeing a lot of the African American perspective, you stop buying the paper, or you believe that everything we do is negative, everything that gets reported about us and gets seen about us is negative. So there's no point.
But you can't argue with the fact that they're not reporting lies.
No.
I mean, what they're talking is true.
Yes, but they pick and choose what they report, and it's based on what has sold in the past and what gets people's attention.
So how does reporting those things affect a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old?
I'm not sure how it does.
So a small kid who sees this newspaper and the image that they see day in and day out is we're robbers, we're rapists, we're thugs.
Well, that can't help that kind of stuff can't help but affect you negatively. You know, but a 5-year-old, who knows? But a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, like when I was growing up in this town reading the Trentonian, when you're 15, 16 years old and you're interested in writing and you don't see anybody of color at your local newspaper, you're not going to pick it up.
Well, and not only that, you're also not going to be inspired to want to do that for a living.
Exactly. And I have a lot of young Black girls in particular who come to me and ask me, you know, I've been writing poetry and I want to get into, you know, doing what you do. I write rap lyrics or whatever. And I say to them, really study some writers. Get into James Baldwin, you know, get into Maya Angelou, get into, you know, Toni Morrison, whoever it is that inspires
Puff Daddy,
you.
get into Suge Knight. Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, the prolific writers of our
Of
time.
our time. Right. Yeah.
So let's talk for a second about, from your experience, and it's strictly experience from what you see,
Yes.
which areas of the media are the least diverse?
News, television news in particular, television news and news journalism takes a huge hit. The first people that are going to be laid off when we're in the Great Recession, right? The first people that are going to be laid off are news people.
Okay.
So if you have a newsroom, say, you know, and you only have 8 reporters and you're trying to, you know, cover a whole city, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get every story. You're only going to go out and get the stories that sell. So that's always going to, you know, set you back when you're trying to be diverse in your coverage. That's always going to set you back, just the lack of bodies in your newsroom.
But, you know, you brought up something really interesting. It kind of segues into my next question for you, and it has to do with the pressure that media is under, and specifically news media, print media. They're competing on a day-to-day basis now with the internet. So let's talk for a second about, is old media and new media, of the two, which is more diverse?
I believe new media is diverse. That's why I made a conscious choice to be a part of new media. I made a conscious choice to go on the internet and not be a part of the newspaper, you know, the politics and all the fighting that you have to do to get one story, you know, to go to print. I believe that the diversity lies in new media, but I also believe that also leaves a lot of people out. The Times-Picayune, for example, in New Orleans, the Times-Picayune newspaper, they're going mostly digital. And a friend of mine, Tremaine Lee, African-American from South Jersey, he won a Pulitzer covering Hurricane Katrina down there for the Times-Picayune. And he was greatly appreciated by the African-American community down there because being an African-American male, he had a particular perspective and he reported from that perspective. Outstanding stuff. But I was talking to him recently and he said, I can't believe the Times-Picayune is going totally digital. I understand that's modernity and they don't have the money and all that.
Hang on.
A lot of poor Black and Latinos can't afford.
Kelly, what does it mean going digital? What does that mean?
It means that a lot of people miss out. It means that a lot of people can miss out.
You mean that
because if you don't have computers and smartphones, they can't pick up a paper. So you're going to, a large portion of the African-American community in New Orleans, is my point, is not going to be able to get the news. The Times-Picayune is going all digital.
Okay, and going all digital means they're going to all electronic. They're not going to have paper anymore?
They're not going to have paper.
Okay, all right, I'm with you. All right. And that is a bad thing because that leaves out a segment of the population.
Exactly. If you have mostly Black poor in the city of New Orleans and they want to find out what's going on, they need a computer or a smartphone. And if you can't afford that, then you don't get the news.
Okay, interesting. So is diversity in media just about hiring more Black folk?
No.
So then what are we talking about here?
That's why affirmative action always, you know, makes people angry, because you want to be able to point to your one Black reporter or your one Black editor or your one Black, you know, person on your editorial board. But like I said, the difference between having sex and making love is that you have to have really some true understanding. Okay,
I want to go back to this having sex and making love thing. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that's a different show. My bad. Okay. So when you do accomplish and you have that diversity in the media, does that change the story or does it enhance the story?
It enhances the story. It doesn't change it.
Okay.
It enhances the story and it gives you perspectives. It gives you the layers that you need. The layers, the perspective that you
Kelly,
need to understand.
Come on now. You're standing there looking at a situation. You're an African American. There is a white person standing right next to you. The two of you are seeing the same thing.
You think we're going to report it the same way?
Why is it any different?
I have a whole lifetime of experience. I was a Black female before I was ever a reporter.
You were?
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I was for at least a few years. So I know that I'm going to report something from a totally different perspective. I go into a story looking at different perspectives. How's this going to affect women? How's this going to affect Black people? How's this going to affect Latinos? I look at that purposely.
Wouldn't you agree that a lot of people can't appreciate that there really are differences in the way that different people see things?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations that I have, is that people want to try to say that we are all the same. People want to all say, oh, no, we're all, but we're not. I mean, literally the way that we see things, and I'm going to really get into this a little bit more with our next guest, but I think one of the things is they refuse to admit that you have an African American standing there and you have a white person or Caucasian standing there, and they really do see things, they see the same thing very differently.
It's like a Rorschach test. Come on. Rorschach
you're lucky I know what that is.
You look at the picture and it's supposed to be a squirrel, but you think it's the Brooklyn Bridge or Rorschach test. That's the way two people can look at the same thing.
You're so intelligent. Oh. Okay, so listen. Let's talk for a second about you. What was it that inspired you, and who inspired you to be a journalist?
Oh gosh, I've been writing since I was 4 or 5 years old. I remember when my mother was pregnant with my sister, I was 7 years old, and I went around and interviewed everybody in the family about how they felt about the new baby, and I took pictures, and I stuck all the pictures on construction paper, and then I sewed the paper together with yarn to make a magazine. I've been doing that since I was 6, 7 years old. So I don't know what exactly inspired me. I was always a writer because I was really shy kid, really kind of an anxious kid.
Kind of like you are now.
Yeah, and it was easier than talking to anybody.
Sure.
But when I got older, I started reading a lot. I started with novels, and then I started reading. I started picking up a lot of newspapers and a lot of magazines. I would pour through my mother's copies of Essence and stuff, and I just was fascinated by that. Absolutely fascinated, and turning the pages of a magazine is still exciting to me now, but I'm in the business and I'm jaded, so it's not the same as when I don't pour through magazines like religiously like I used to. But I can't say it was any one person.
Okay.
I've always been motivated to communicate, and writing was always my
So here's what I want to do. I'm going to ask our producers if they can. There are a number of images of people that are in the media in various capacities. And I'm going to ask them if they could flash some of these up here. And I want you to take a look at some of these pictures. And I'm going to ask our producers not to move them until I ask them to. But this is Frederica Whitfield. And one of the reasons I have her up here, she is an anchor, a weekend anchor for CNN, obviously an African American. And I actually have followed her for a great number of years and seen kind of her ascension, if you will.
Yeah, I've never seen her.
She has done very well. But I'd like for them to go ahead and just show some of these different pictures. And I'd like for you to give us, as you see some of these different pictures, I'd like for you to kind of give us a little bit of perspective on kind of who these people are or how they influence you. This is Joe Madison from The Power, who is a radio XM talk show host.
And they've really been hit hard.
They have. So all right. So we have Joe Madison, who is in the media in the radio side, if you will. So go ahead and just show some of these different ones. You're familiar with this young lady?
Yes, she's fantastic.
And who is she?
She's the president of Radio 1. I'm blanking on her name now.
Kathy Hughes. Right.
Yes, yeah.
An amazing person, and has
really built that company to be a true competitor with Clear Channel.
Okay,
yeah, it's really good.
And so they are a competitor with Clear Channel. She's obviously an African American woman, has really distinguished herself. I think we have some more pictures coming. I think you recognize this gentleman.
I do.
Okay. Done a number of different things. Tavis Smiley.
Yeah.
From a
really passionate. I think he works much like I do, is that he works from anger. He likes to really work his anger into his work. He kind of what's the word I want? It's a catharsis for him.
Okay. All right. In addition to that, we also have more. we have
Michael Baisden.
We have Michael Baisden. And let me just say, we have just a number of different people on here, and the reason they're there is because we are in fact represented in media.
Absolutely.
But is this enough?
No.
Is Michael Baisden and Wanda Sykes and Steve Harvey, Ed Bradley, are these enough?
Well, Wanda Sykes is a comedian, and she's interesting, to watch. And that's another thing, is that when you're thinking of the entertainment factor and not necessarily the journalist factor. I understand that. I understand the reason for that, that many more people will tune in to watch a comedian than to watch a journalist. And she's charismatic and she's hilarious and really, really sharp. But that's not the kind of diversity that we need in journalism.
Well, and so like for her and Steve Harvey, one of the reasons that they're on here is because they also host radio shows and in some major markets.
Yeah.
Is that really the essence of the journalism and where we
no,
need to
but
have
that's
our
where
diversity?
it's going. That's where it's going. I mean, that's why Al Sharpton got a show. You know,
because
he's a hot button.
Okay.
You know, and he can draw a lot of attention and make MSNBC or wherever he is make a lot of money. But he's not a journalist.
Does that take away from the integrity of a true journalist?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. And I'm not discounting anything that Al Sharpton has to say. You know, I think he's really, sharp on a lot of issues and really, really important person in our community, but he's not a journalist.
So tomorrow morning when the Trentonian runs the headline, Kelly Murphy says Al Sharpton.
Al Sharpton ain't a journalist. I don't think he's going to argue with you.
Okay. Listen, Kelly, thank you so much for being my guest today. It was good to have you back again. I appreciate it. Don't go anywhere yet. You're running away. I appreciate you being here. I just want to say again to everyone that the website is kcmjournalists.com. Kelly is a wonderful journalist and covers from a very unique perspective. So, Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us today. So our next guest is Robin Parker, Esquire. As you recall, Robin is the executive director of the Beyond Diversity Resource Center, former deputy attorney general in the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice, as well as a former chief of the Office of Bias, Crime and Community Relations. So Robin, welcome back.
It's a pleasure, Ken.
Welcome back. Listen, I appreciate you being here. You obviously had an opportunity to hear some of the discussion that we had with Kelly. And Kelly kind of comes at it from a different perspective because she's living it. And oftentimes when you're living it and it makes the difference on what goes on the table or if there's even a table there,
sure.
It's a different kind of view or perspective. So when we talk about diversity and the importance of diversity in the media, she has a very unique perspective that I felt like was necessary. What I want to do with you is I want to kind of have you as kind of the cleanup hitter, if you will.
Okay.
Because what we really want to take a step back and do is we really want to deal with that D word. Everybody talks about it. It's on everybody's tongue nowadays. Yeah. So the question to you, Robin, to kind of start off is what exactly is diversity and why do we care?
Sure. Well, diversity can be thought of at its core is how we are different. Mm-hmm. Sociologists would say it is how groups of people within a particular society are different. Mm-hmm. And we're used to dealing with that. For example, race, color, creed, religion, ethnicity are all ways in which we talk about difference in the society. The reason that I think it's really important to talk about diversity is that by merely raising the question about diversity within a society, you're saying, well, who are the people who are outside the mainstream? And if you're asking who they are, it means that you may have to address their needs. You may have to address people who are invisible. You may have to address things that are normally unprioritized.
So on that topic then, or kind of along that vein, so is that kind of why has diversity, why does that kind of have a bit of a negative connotation? Why do people kind of go, oh, we got to do the diversity thing? Why is that?
Well, because diversity is thrown up in a lot of different contexts. Very often people have to attend the diversity training at work, which is the equal employment affirmative action training, which everybody hates. And so there'll be a video on how not to discriminate against women.
Right.
Folks hate that. They've gone over it a million times. And it's a way for businesses to cover themselves, if you will. Another kind of training is considered anti-prejudice education.
Okay.
And people often pull back from that because people want to think that they're fully formed. They don't really have very much work to do. They like everybody else.
Right.
And especially adults don't like to be told that, well, maybe there's some work to do in understanding some folks.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to do is I want to put up on the screen this diversity. It's called Dimensions of Diversity. And I don't know if you can see that very well. But can you just walk us a little bit through that? Because I think people don't really understand that there are many dimensions of diversity. I'm going to ask if we can leave that there and give you a minute to talk about that.
Sure. The wheel of diversity that you have here really talks about differences among people or groups of people. In the center, the orange part, what happens is that you have what we often call the core dimensions of diversity. Those are things about yourself that you cannot change. Age, race, sexual orientation, and gender. Now, we understand that, in rare circumstances, people can change their gender. Very few people can change their race. And
other than Michael Jackson.
Exactly. Of course. There's always the exception. And of course, with time, all of us age. But you understand what I mean. Those things are fixed for most of us. And then you get into the other rings where we have more influence, especially in our society. Your life experiences, whether you're married or not married, whether you have children, what your work is, and the like. And then finally, in the very outer rings, you have things that are even more subject to change. As we get older, we advance in our job, as an example. So that really tends to show core and more minor aspects of diversity, keeping in mind that simply because it's minor doesn't mean it's not important to the individual.
So all of this is diversity.
It is diversity.
And all of this is really just a way of saying the many different ways that we are all different.
It is. And it raises some tough issues for us from time to time.
Oh, so and that kind of brings me to a point that I want to make here, and that is that a lot of people would really like to kind of poo-poo that and say, well, you know what, we're not different, we're all the same, we're all Americans, we're all from the human race or whatever, there's only one race, the human race, etc. And then it kind of leads them down a road into this whole concept of being racially colorblind.
Yes.
And when we were here before, you fascinated me because we had a conversation about that. So let me kind of launch that conversation again by asking you to talk for just a second about the detrimental concepts of being racially colorblind.
Sure. The idea of colorblindness entered the American lexicon with the case that your viewers might be familiar with, Plessy versus Ferguson.
Right, absolutely.
Plessy versus Ferguson was a case which said that separate but equal was okay. And the dissent by Justice Harlan said, no, I disagree with the majority here, and that the Constitution is colorblind, that in fact, in the eye of the Constitution, one group of people isn't more important than another. Here's the really interesting thing about what Justice Harlan had to say, however. In his dicta, he said that, well, the Constitution may be colorblind, but I'm not. And we all know that white people are inherently superior and will continue to be so, he said in the opinion, as long as they do the right thing. And so colorblindness is taught in the United States as the way that we deal with each other racially. That is that I walk up to you and say, Ken, I just see your spirit. I don't notice that you're African American. You're a person. I don't care whether you're black, white, green, blue, or polka dot.
And we get that a lot.
Yeah, you get that a lot. It's a real safety valve. It says, I don't want to notice anything about you. Two things are wrong with it. One, it's a lie. It's not true. We do notice race, among other things. And second, the research is showing that that actually reinforces stereotypes, one. And two, it makes people immune from noticing obvious discrimination when it happens. And so as we teach our kids to be colorblind, it means we're also teaching them not to notice how people are hurt around race and other differences.
And so one of the things that I hear a lot of parents kind of brag about is, well, I teach my children that we're all the same and that, you know, that African-American child is no different than they are. Is that kind of the concept of colorblindness, or what should they teach their kids?
You have to teach your kids holistically. You have to teach them two things, and you have to hold the concepts that, of course, we all have some essential humanness in common, but you also have to teach them, so the studies say, that we have some differences that are important. Gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, all of those things make a difference, and especially if you're a member of a group that's marginalized or hurt because of oppression, if that's affecting your life, you need people who can be in your corner and see it. And if they don't see it, they're much more likely to blame you for problems that are outside of your control than not. And that's why it's important.
And so I don't know if you can do this, but we're talking here about the importance of diversity in the media. Do we see this concept of racially colorblind in the media? Does that play out at all?
Oh, yeah, we do. I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is the first time in human history when the stories that we tell about ourselves, about other people, and what our values are not mostly told by parents and teachers and others in our community, but really by people who are part of a media empire and who have an interest in profit.
Okay.
And who are often very detached from the people that they serve. And so if you don't have a broad perspective, if you're colorblind, if you think you're doing the best you can, but you're not doing that self-examination, you can lock in some really nasty stereotypes about groups of people that can have devastating effects on them over the long term, and you can do it with the best of intentions.
But so we talk a little bit about this concept of the media, but is it really a problem when the majority, they're the majority, and mostly everybody looks like them, so why should it be a big deal if they're the ones reporting the stories?
Well, it has to do with values. Do you care enough, for example, about what happens in the rest of the world? I dare say that if you ask most Americans, they're mostly unaware of the genocide that happened in Uganda, the displacement of thousands of people in South America, the fact that people in Haiti, for example, the children in Haiti are mostly malnourished. It's not because the people who report the news or don't report the news are evil. It's just that they have a particular spin on things, and that influences how we see other people and ultimately whether we have sympathy toward them.
So I was reading an article recently about the whole Trayvon Martin situation, and it talked about two different reporters and how one of them was Caucasian, the other was African American, and it was the African American perspective that ultimately drove reaction, because the African American perspective, because they reported on the Trayvon situation locally, but it was the perspective of the African American that really kind of prompted what we saw as the national response. Is that an example of kind of the importance of diversity in the media?
Well, it is. What you've got to understand is that if the media feeds us lots of stories about who we are and who other people are, that they can lock in ideas about who people are. And so, for example, stereotypes which occur in the media will tend to make people think that every African American, every Latino is the same. In other words, they're all from Puerto Rico, or they're all just like this. And so the range of who people are becomes smaller. Second, it tends more and more to justify bad treatment. In other words, if I get lots and lots of media coverage showing Black people as savages, Black people who are problem people, I'm going to be less sympathetic when something happens to people who are members of those groups. All the while holding on to color blindness, all the while thinking that I'm perfectly fair.
Let me share something with you that I read this past week, and I kind of like to get your response, your reaction to it. As we were kind of preparing for this show, I was reading about the difference in the way that different races report the exact same story. And the example was a story about Michael Vick, as reported by a major national newspaper and as reported by the Griot, which is, although it is owned by a large corporation, all of the staff, the reporters, the editors are all African American. The difference was not so much the content, but the two pictures that ran. In the one article, the picture of Michael Vick, and it was talking about something that Michael Vick was doing in the community. But the one picture of Michael Vick showed him looking down, very sullen, when he was accused of the whole dogfighting thing. And the other picture had a picture of him smiling and looking very nice. But that seems so obvious to me. Is it really that obvious?
Well, it's not obvious to the people who put things out. You see, that we're all trapped by our own culture, and we're all trapped by our ideas of who people are. And so when things like what you just gave an example of happen, the people who take that picture say, well, you know, I wasn't trying to be mean to Michael Vick. It just seemed to me to be appropriate, right?
Okay.
It just seemed to me to be the way to capture what was going on.
Right.
And so it's not as though there's a cabal of people who are conspiring to do it. It's just that they haven't checked out their own stuff. And by not checking out their own stuff, it means that those stereotypes just get keep getting pushed on and on and on.
But Robin, but how does those images, the images that we see on magazines, television, in print, why does that really matter what the images are? Aren't we smart enough to know who we are without worrying about what we see on TV?
No, we're not.
No.
We're not. We're not.
Okay.
It's mass media is a huge part of what we think about ourselves, especially since in our modern society that is so electronic and so digital. And we have a society in which family members don't sit around and tell their own stories as much as they used to.
Right.
Children are on phones, they're on computers much more than they're unfortunately often talking to their parents.
Right.
Those images are reality. And so the image that we see of people of color, the images that we see of women, the images that we don't see of, for example, persons with disability, lock in our thinking about who those folks are. All the while, of course, all of us want to feel the best about ourselves. We want to feel that we're really fair. And so we get defensive. We say, well, I certainly don't not cover people with disabilities because I mean them harm. And that's true. But the problem is that we don't get out of our own way because we're locked into ways of thinking. We need to recheck ourselves, is what I'm suggesting to you.
And I want to go down that road in just one second. And before we actually get there, one of the things that when you and I first connected that would really grab my attention was this book on your website called The Anti-Racist Cookbook.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I'm sure I did exactly what you meant me to do, and that was, what is this?
Right.
What is it? Fried chicken? I mean, mac and cheese?
Right.
What is the anti-racist?
Right.
But it wasn't that at all. So talk a little bit about the Anti-Racist Cookbook.
Sure. It's published by my organization, Beyond Diversity, and the purpose of it was to get people talking about the subject that we never talk about, or hardly ever talk about in our society, race. One of the reasons we don't talk about it is we don't have really good tools to do so. How do we talk about it? How do we engage in the conversation? It's really important to do that because psychological studies show that white people, for the most part...
Hang on just a second. This is fact, by the way.
Yeah, this is fact.
Go ahead.
This is fact. Recent psychological studies show that white people really don't want to talk about race, primarily because they want to avoid feeling guilty about it.
Okay.
Right? And so it's tough to engage, right? Because there's great pushback from talking about it. So the book is all about how do we have these conversations, what are the questions, and how can we really begin to talk about something that has shaped so much of American life before America actually was America.
So then the book then kind of gives you a recipe for how to have these tough conversations.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everything from what's the setting, what are the questions, and how do we facilitate that conversations without making people too mad. Right.
But the truth of the matter is, when you have these kinds of conversations, isn't it it's almost expected that some feelings somewhere are going to get ruffled, and because it's a tough conversation, right?
Well, it should be, but it's not an impossible conversation. The truth is that the reason that the conversation is important is because race changes people's lives, and therefore it's full of emotion. But it doesn't mean that we can't do that with peace. It doesn't mean we can't do that with honor. And at least in my experience, no one has died because of the conversation about race. Not yet.
Okay. But you also have something on your website also called a red box.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the red box diversity system is one of our ways to reach out to businesses. So if they want to learn more about diversity that we described before, it is a self-learning system where folks take a box full of exercises, move through them, and every month report back to their supervisor, and everybody collectively learns about all those aspects of diversity that were shown on the slide earlier.
Okay. So let me kind of shift gears for just 1 second and talk a little bit about, as we look at the evolution of this whole discussion on race, what is the difference between sensitivity training and diversity training?
Well, here's the thing. Sensitivity training was something that people referred to in the 60s and 70s. And it was often where you get a group of black people and white people together, and the black folks would yell at each other about racial oppression, and the white folks would either yell back or be very sorry. And it simply didn't work. Lots of screaming, lots of yelling didn't work. Diversity training can take various forms, but I think at its heart, this is what good diversity training needs to do. It needs to look at the whole person and it also needs to look at power differentials in the society so that we can begin to step a little bit away from the personal, instead talk about big systems like the mass media that we've been talking about today and how they affect people's lives.
So, Robin, when we talk about the importance of diversity in media, I want to spend a few minutes, because we only have a few minutes left. I want to spend a few minutes talking about some solutions. How then can we, on a very basic, everyday level, how can we impact diversity in the media?
Well, I'm from an educational organization, so first thing I believe in is education.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to realize that those images that we get from the media affect us too, and can often blind us to the very stereotypes about our own group. So we need to get educated and aware. One of the places that I suggest people turn is an organization called FAIR. Let me see if I can get the acronym right. It's Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting.
Okay.
They're available on the web. You can subscribe to some of their publications, and they take the major media to task. They talk about the imbalances. They talk about what kind of representation do we really have in newsrooms? How balanced is the reporting? That's one really important thing. Another thing is, we need to read other things too. There's a wonderful book called Cultural Diversity in U.S. Mass Media, which talks about the importance of cultural diversity and also gives some really specific things that we can do. But beyond education, let me also suggest this. I think that we have to use the power of the pen and the power of our voice.
Okay.
We're very busy people, but editors take note when people call in and write in and say, look, I don't think that this is quite the way this should have been reported. I'm wondering about what your diversity policy is. People really care about that because it affects the bottom line. And also they're really good people, even good white people, I will add, in newsrooms.
Right.
So write to them.
I'm not sure about that point.
I know. This will never be recorded.
Are you sure? Okay. They're all bad.
They're all bad. It's horrible. This will never be seen again.
That's right. There goes my political aspirations.
Oh, gosh. It's over with. Oh, well.
Okay. No, there are some good ones, right? Absolutely.
There are some good folks out there.
And let me just say this, and I think this is something that I heard you say at a seminar that we had not long ago, and that is that none of us can expect to get to where we go by ourselves.
Yeah, and that means that we need to bring our allies along. There's a natural tendency if people of color are saying, well, this is biased, to think, well, they're really kind of self-interested. Their view is bent. So we need to get people who are white allies, just as people with disabilities need to have able-bodied allies in their corners saying, that's right, we need the change. And so we need to take our allies along with us. It just can't be African Americans pushing for African American. We need our allies to help us.
So, Robin, one of the things that I want to just mention, because I'm really impressed by you, is that you went to the University of Illinois Law School.
I did.
On a full scholarship,
I did.
Which is unbelievable, and I applaud you for that. So for just one quick second, talk for just a second about what is it that we can do with our young people relative to the media. How do we get them to go in that direction?
One of the things that I am is an English major as well at Rutgers. And what I would say to our young people of color, is learn the power of the language.
Okay.
Become writers.
Okay.
Become journalists. Marvel at the power of the pen.
Is writing a rap song the same as being a journalist?
It isn't. It isn't.
I'm just asking because my son thinks he's a journalist.
It isn't.
If that's the case.
It isn't. And it's not easy. Like anything else, it requires real study. It requires professionalism, and it can't be mastered overnight.
And is that kind of that foundation of really getting into media and journalism?
Absolutely. In my experience, people of letters change the world. And if you want to change mass media, you've got to know how to write. You've got to know how to speak. You've got to master the language. And some of the most powerful writers that I know of have been people of color. Right. So I would say one thing to do is to really master that above all else.
Above all else, absolutely. Well, Robin, I certainly appreciate you being here today. I think you bring some very interesting aspects to all of this. And I want to bring you back because I certainly, I know that you were formerly the chief of the Office of Bias Crime.
That's right.
And I certainly want to come back because we want to do a discussion about that, because the whole Trayvon Martin thing, there's now allegations, or now people are talking about the FBI potentially bringing a hate crime charge,
right.
et cetera. And I want to make sure our viewers really understand what that means, and they understand what that looks like. And they understand that it's not just one dimensional, it's not just one way, that it can go the other way as well. And I want to have that conversation. But I really appreciate you being here today to talk about the importance of diversity in media and the very interesting things that you brought. And let me just also say that to this extent, Robin actually is part of Beyond Diversity Resource Center. And what they do is they actually go out and they do seminars and instructional series on diversity, which is a very difficult topic to discuss. Part of the reason is because a lot of people already feel like they're very liberated. A lot of people feel like they don't have any real biases or issues, and no one likes to ever be called a racist. You can call a person any number of different things. I know people who have been called all different kinds of curse words and don't respond as negatively as they do when someone calls them a racist. So what do we do about that? At the end of the day, I think there are a number of different things that we can glean from our conversation today with Kellie and with Robin. And the first one is that we have to advocate for diversity. We must get beyond just having sex into making love. We have to get to the point where we are making love and it is passionate, and you have the wine glasses and you have the oh, I'm sorry, my bad. We're okay. I'm sorry. Back to diversity here. We have to advocate for diversity. We have to get to the point to where we appreciate and understand the need for diversity. And you can't just advocate for it inside of your closed circles. You have to advocate for it with others. You have to not be confrontational, but you have to be informational when it comes to talking to the press, letting them see the power that your perspective brings. One of the other things, obviously, is education. We must learn about our own community. We must be advocates for education, and we must learn the difference in factual reporting and opinions, because that's really important. You know, you can stand outside all day long and you can say that we're not that bad and we don't kill, murder, rape, etc. You can say that all day long, but at the end of the day, if all that people know about are the negative things and you're not being proactive in bringing in the positive things, then we certainly have some responsibility in that as well. So when we talk about the things that we can do as a community, we need to police the media better. We need to be on the front end of ensuring that our story is being told the way we want to tell it. And then the other thing that we have to really look at is the power of the pen. It's not enough to just sit back and complain. You know, Robin said, and I happen to agree 100%, is that we have to learn to write, and not rap songs and not poems and not showing up for open mic night to do the whole written or spoken word thing. We have to learn to write in a proactive manner that is going to bring about positive change, and that is what we must do. It's not good enough to just write poems and love songs, and it's not good enough to just do these kinds of things that are not going to amount to anything positive as far as moving the needle of diversity. We have to be proactive, and we have to learn that when we see things that we don't like, we don't just complain about them. We write them. Write to your local editor. Write to the editors in your area and let them know, we would like for you to bring more positive news stories about our community and put them out. And you know what? If you don't see them and all you see are the rapers and the murderers, then we'll help you identify stories. We will find someone like a Kellie C. Murphy at www.kcmjournalist.com, and we will get her to write the kind of stories for you, and we'll submit those to you. We'll do the work for you. That's the kind of thing we have to do. And then the final thing I would say is we have to encourage our young people to get into this area professionally. We have to encourage them to become journalists. We have to encourage them to want to be cameramen and to want to be reporters and to want to be anchor people. It's not good enough to send all of our young people to be athletes or to be entertainers or to be rappers. We have to encourage our young people to get into these areas because this is where it really makes a difference. At the end of the day, the responsibility for diversity in the media is as much ours as a community as it is the major conglomerates out there. We give them a pass when we don't force their hand. We give them a pass when we don't demand that they show a holistic view of our community. And when I say our community, I'm not just talking African American. Whoever you are out there, substitute your community in, Latino, Asian American, whatever it is, I'm talking to you. At the end of the day, it's time to take words to action and do that. I want to thank our special guest today, Kellie C. Murphy. I want to thank Robin Parker Esquire for them being with us today. I also want to just return for just one quick second and thank Kellie C. Murphy for that example about taking sex to making love. I'm going to marinate on that a little while tonight. So Kellie, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Listen, you've been with Ken Gordon and Words to Action. You have a wonderful week, and let's take words and turn them into action.